Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Blended Learning Design Center webinar. My name is Martin Cisneros, the Tech Profe on Twitter and pretty much every other social media. And something we want to talk to you about is I want you to start thinking about your goals and visions for 2018. We're like 18 years into the 21st century. What do we want to accomplish by the following year, or 2020 or 2021, with our students? So I hope you're thinking about the different ways we are changing in our classroom, because we're talking about blended learning and what does it look like in your site, right? If we look at iNicole, if we look at ISTE and these other wonderful global educational supports, what you're seeing most and most is how do we get students to take some some type of grasp of having control over their own learning, right? So I'm talking about online learning. I'm talking about blended learning specifically, right? And how do we get our students to the point where they know how to use the right tool to do the right task? Well, like I said before, it's all about the task, not about the tools. So it doesn't matter what gadget you have. That will probably be its worst it's ever been. I want you to think about that for a moment, right? When I got my wonderful little iPhone 10 last year, I'm thinking, wow, this is great. And I usually do the upgrades now just specifically for the cameras. But the reality is, like it was 10 years ago when I got my first one, or over 10 years now, right? I call it the tank because that was the first generation. So every time this thing breaks, I still use that one. But they keep on getting better and better. So it's not the tools, because I now have everything I used to carry or couldn't carry, and it's a wonderful thing. And the tools are going to get better and better. So my focus, hopefully you have figured out in the series, is about the tasks. What do we want our students to do? And how can we support our students with tools in order to enhance their experience, in order to enhance their communication skills with learning and acquiring a new language? So first thing I want to talk about is the Stammer Model, right? So for those of you who are not familiar, this was brought to us by Dr. Ruben Puentedura, and it's a model designed to help us to see more or less how we're using education, right? So the Stammer stands for Substitution, where tech acts as a direct tool for substitute with no functional change. Augmentation, where tech acts as a direct tool for substitution with functional improvement. Modification, which tech allows for significant task redesign. And the R for redefinition, which tech allows the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable if that tech did not exist, right? So if you learn about it, you understand that for I believe the years like 1948, since we've been using educational technology here in the United States, that if we don't teach above that line, and if you're seeing the graphic right now, is that line between where it says enhancement and transformation, we're not going to see a lot of change with our students. So many of us, when we start learning how to use technology and learning how to blend technology in our instruction, we start off at the substitution augmentation model, right? And this is what I mean. When you start thinking about using technology, I want you to start thinking about, what will you gain by replacing this task with tech, right? For the substitution component. The augmentation component is, does tech add new features that improves the original task? The modification component is, does the task significantly change with the use of tech, right? And it should. And the R, does the tech allow for creation of new tasks previously inconceivable? So I want you to just stop for a moment and reflect on the tools that you're using in the classroom. Okay? And also understand, you'll hear this quite a bit. Oh, Stammer is like a ladder. You go up and you stay up there. The reality is no. This is a wave, because like the rest of the world, there's new tools, there's new gadgets, so we learn. So we are going to start off at the S and A at some point, but the target is to continue moving towards the top. So think of blooms in that way, right? You always want to be at the creative and critical thinking components. We're not going to do that. What we are going to do is I want you to take a look at this graphic, right? And on the left-hand side, you have the class task, right? Whether it's note-taking, research, presenting, file sharing, reading, or assessment. And on the right, you have the different components of the Stammer model. So let's take at note-taking, right? Because I think note-taking is something that we believe that all students know how to do, but the reality is some of them have never been taught how to note-take. We just assume that they know, right? So if you're looking at note-taking, substitution is notes taken using iOS notes. iOS, of course, is Apple's version, but no matter what note-taking tool you use, that would be the difference, right? The augmentation is students choose their own notes app. So, now you're allowing the students to choose because they have a variety of apps that they can use towards this. Where it gets interesting is at the modification component, because all students use Notability, which is an app, by the way, for all notes, right? And Notability has certain features that you could not get in most note apps, right? And then you see the redefinition component where teachers have access to all of student notes in one place, right? That's kind of redefining what you do with it. That could be completely different on what you do. But I want you to just take a look, and if you need to pause the video, pause the video. You also have my presentation deck right below this video as well. So look at reading, right? Reading, as you can see, is something that that builds pretty nicely. But as we move forward, the question I want to answer is, how do we go fishing for tools? Because I get this all the time. Martin, how do you know all this stuff, right? How do you know which tools to use and at what time? How do you know when it's the right time to use technology? So I have a variety of different methods. I listen to podcasts, I read books, I go online on Twitter and different social media, and I use hashtags for certain things. I see what people are doing. I connect with people globally, and this is a ongoing basis. This is daily because like everything else, new tools pop up, new gadgets pop up, and old tools fade away. But for me, is I like looking at the strategies that people are using. And after you start doing this for a while, you get to understand that you can now remember certain tools that will fit that category, specifically for the task that you want your students to do. So where I'm going to guide you today is this wonderful website called edtechteacher.org. And let me just show you how I use this, right? So with EdTech Teacher, first of all, it's a great blog, great information. I've never been to any of their summits, but from what I hear as feedback, I hear it's really, really good. But this is how I use it with teachers. And sometimes for myself as well, right? It's a great reminder. So I go towards of course, go to the website, edtechteacher.org, go down here towards the middle where it says how we help, and I scroll down here to where it says classroom apps recommended for teachers. So I click on that, and then I love the way this website is set up. So now I scroll down and it asks me a question. Where do you want to begin? On the left-hand side, it says I want to find apps by mobile devices that I might have in my classroom, or I want to find apps by learning activity. So do you take the left pill or the right pill? Right? Part of the matrix. Hopefully you're thinking you want to go towards the right because we want to find apps by learning activity, especially with our ELLs. And then I love this next question, right? What do you want your students to do? Do you want them to record and edit video, get class content, study, create presentations, collaborate? And I'm like, ooh, that's what I want my students to do. Because remember, I'm here after I've done my planning, after I know what I want my students to do. I then come here to find the right tech. But you can spend some time in here, learning a variety of different tools. But let's just stick with this one. So I'm going to click on here where it says collaborate. And I love this next question that comes up. What is your device? iPad, Chromebook, Android, or laptop? So I'm going to just take a second here to explain what I do, right? So the first thing I think about is what devices do my students have in front of them in my classroom, right? Now, I might have done my homework, and at the beginning of the year, did a survey. Is also finding out what devices students have at home, if they have devices at home, and if they have access or what type of access, right? But the first thing I think about is, what do I have in my classroom? So most of us are now using Google. But the reality is, if you own a Windows machine or an Apple machine, you can use the Google Chrome web browser. So it works out pretty well. But if you have the other ones, you can click on those as well. But I'm going to go to Chromebook. And once again, I'm looking for tools to collaborate. And my students primarily use a Chromebook in my classroom. So next, it gives me at least 8 different tools for us to use, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on Padlet. When I do, it tells me the price, the ease of use, and the usefulness, right? And it gives me a little blurb about it. So what I do is I try to at least choose one that I can explore for a bit. But here's what I do next, right? So I go through them. I try to select the best one. So in my head at the moment, I might say, Padlet's a really great, it's a really great tool that I can use for this upcoming activity. But this is what I do next, right? So Padlet's not my number one, but I also know that at home, students of mine have either an iPad or have an Apple machine or a Windows machine or an Android tablet. Here's what I do next. Up here at the top, I start, on the left-hand side, go with the iPad, and what do I look for? I look to see if they have the same application. So I see, the app that I selected, Padlet, is also on the iPad. Win-win so far, right? I then continue to look at the other ones to see other similarities. What do I see? I see that Google Keep is also here. I see Google Drive is also here. And I see Evernote's also here, right? So I'm like, okay, I can use any of those tools, but I'm going to stick primarily to Padlet at the moment. I then go over to the Apple and Windows machine. And what do I see here? Once again, I see Padlet, so 3 for 3 or 4 for 3 because we're using 2 machines here, right? Last but not least, I do the same thing, and what do I see again? I see Padlet, right? So now I have at least a tool that I know that every time I want to do some type of collaboration, Padlet might be one of those tools, right? So if I click on Padlet, and I believe we talked about it in one of our earlier versions, but one of the things I love about Padlet is that it allows me to present information in a variety of different formats, but it also allows my students to provide their answers in different formats. So anything from creating a video to just creating audio. They can write text. They can search something from the web. They can do a sketch note for drawing. There's multiple ways of presenting information and showcasing information, right? So that's what I do. But so that's that's a major part. The next component is, how do you build up schema, right? How do you build up schema with all of these tools that I'm talking about? So here's what I do. If I know, every time I introduce a tool, I try to use it in an activity that's simple that everyone can do. Once I start seeing that my students start to become fluent with these applications, what I do next is I now divide up my students to, say, maybe 4 different groups. And I might say, okay, team 1, your job is to do this activity, but I want you to use Evernote, right? Oh, and by the way, when you present, you are going to deliver a 3-minute presentation on how to use that tool. I do the same thing with the second team. Second team, you're gonna go ahead and use Google Drive for this same activity. And once again, your job is also to create a 3-minute video. And I'm saying 3-minute video or 3-minute presentation is totally up to you, about how do we use this tool and how to use it in your activity. Do the same thing with Google Keep and do the same thing with Padlet. Now, mind you, I've only talked about that I know Padlet very well. I don't know the other three. But this is what I do when it comes to presentation time, right? When it comes time to showcase that activity. I sit in the corner of the classroom as the group goes up, and I'll say, okay, group one, go ahead, your turn. Oh, just as a reminder, I want to make sure that you do your presentation about the tool before you begin your showcase. And what I do is I'm sitting here in the back, and if the first group goes up, it's Evernote. I haven't used Evernote. But these kids, who has more time than you do? The kids do, right? So they'll figure out the tech, they'll figure out the cool things, what to do with it, and then they'll present on it. So what am I doing in the background, right? I have my teacher poker face on because the students automatically assume that I know how to use this tool. And over here, once again, I have my poker face. But inside my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. We can do this. I can use this tool for that. And that's how I am throughout pretty much the rest of the showcasing until they get to Padlet. But I'm going to give you some advice. You might think you know how to use a tool until you let your kids loose on them. They're going to show you some amazing things. So guess what ends up happening at the same time? Not only are they teaching you, but they're also teaching their peers at the same time. And what do I do for this first week? They're using that particular, team one is using Evernote. Guess what? The following week or the following activity that we use, team one will then be using Padlet, and we go through the same process. So every student gets an opportunity to use and learn of how to use one of these tools. And this is how they build up schema. And guess what? Who else builds up schema? You do as a teacher, because you are learning as we go. All right? So I'm going to stop there because I want you to practice, right? That's going to be hopefully part of your assignment this year, is learning how to search for tools. In my slide deck that I have provided, you're also going to see, different ways that people do this before. I attended and presented at a wonderful event not long ago, in which there were a variety of different presenters that pretty much showcase how they use the tools into their instruction. So this is a great link for you to view and see some of that. But I also want you to know that there are other websites that you can learn a lot from other teachers learning how to blend instruction. Common Sense Media has their media lesson flows. And then there's a lot of scope and sequences that are out there. So I provided one that is used by one of our local school districts, is their technology standards through their scope and sequence. And in there, they have a place where they showcase the tools that they use. Okay. So with that in mind, understand that you're going to see a lot of information. I'm going to add this one as well. This one's pretty popular. The pedagogy wheel, which for the iPad app, or for the iOS, I should say, has been going on for a while. So this is their latest version, which I have. But anyways, you get to see some cross-reference here from using EdTech Teacher. So with that, thank you, and see you at the next one.